Alright, hi there. I don't know if you got through the series of videos that I did previously, but I did an introduction to, uh, some really light introduction to how you can find geometry in a binary file, and then I went through C++ and made a really rudimentary importer. Got through that. I'm not in any way skilled at C++, but I do use it when when I need to. Now I'm going to show that exercise that we did in the previous video where I imported a model into Blender, but I'm going to be using 3ds Max. So for most of the videos that I did in that series, everything was with 100% free software, but I just want to show this in 3ds Max. 3ds Max is a paid software, obviously, but just to show it also in here in the simplicity that we get when there's already libraries that are already available to you. So we're going to do the same thing, but in Maxscript. Okay, they also have Python in here, I think. There's a Python interpreter, but we're going to be focusing on the Maxscript portion. When I started learning C++, I found it overwhelming and too difficult, and then when I got introduced to Maxscript by a friend, Crocs, it was mind-opening. It was just so simple. I started programming there. It became fun, and then later on, when I returned back to C++, I found that the concepts were easier to understand at that point. Alright, so we're going to write the same program, but we already have, I'm trying to find the documents. This is the documents here. This explains the API, I guess, or how Maxscript works. So you kind of have to be familiar with the functions that they give you, but we get a function called fopen, which gives us access to the file, and then they give us from there all those things that we wrote, such as where's the read functions? Like reading a long value would be reading an integer 32, those kind of things. There's like a read float, okay. Okay, read float is 32-bit float. So you have all these things at your fingertips. So I'll just show you how easy that actually would be to program. So let me find my file again, and then we'll start this up. So I'm going to put my file here. So just put the screen size up as big as I can so you can see what's going on. And then we're going to start write this. So for us, it's just fopen. Sorry, with the create a variable. F equals fopen. Oops, I am freaking tired. Holy crap. And then we're going to replace all these with double slashes because 3ds Max also requires that. Okay, and then at the end, instead of writing in some weird enumerator, we just write in this text, the abbreviation to stand for we're reading binary. Okay, in C++, we also have to set that as well, but it uses some crazy enumerator thing. Like I'll show you, like in C++ for fstream, we had to use this thing, right? It's crazy. It's like that. Anyway, let's go back over here. And so now we've opened the file. We of course need to remember to close the file at the end. So I'm gonna go ahead and close it. So with C++, we had to make our own class. In the class, when it gets basically decommissioned, it would automatically close our file. But this doesn't work the same way. So we don't have control over the deconstructor. So the file will remain open until we expressively tell it to close. So we're going to leave this at the bottom to close the file when we're done. Okay, and this can be at the top. Now we just fill the stuff in between it. So basically we're going to do the same thing we did in the last program. So I'm going to copy some of the offsets that we have. So like this one. And so we're going to go fseek, and then we tell it which file we're seeking on. So that's f, and we give it the amount, and then we tell it which direction to go. So we do use an enumerator here called seek set, which is the same as seek absolute that we used, I guess. You could also set up enumerators here as well. So I could go seek set equals this, or I think we used absolute, and we can set these up, oops, like this. So we can call this one our relative one and our end one, and then we just replace them respectively, like this. And then you would just express that at the end there, okay? So we seek to that position, and then we need to read those values. So we're gonna go with, I forgot what I called it. Let's just copy this to save time, and then we'll just replace the parts that we need to replace. So this is our comment in 3ds Max with double slashes. And here in 3ds Max, you don't need to declare type. You can if you want, but for example here, it's flexible. So in this case, we don't express it. 3ds Max will basically it'll determine the type for you when you put an input into it. So this is common with other scripting languages, such as Python. They don't require a type. You can enter them if you wish, but basically it works off your inputs. Whatever your input is, your variable will adjust accordingly to fit the data type. Vertex buffer size, we're going to do read long, and that's going to read our int32 from our file. So you have to express which file is. Okay, and just replace that. We're going to calculate the buffer info. So this stuff remains the same. We don't need to use the semicolons to denote the new lines. I didn't talk about that in C++ because I didn't want to get too focused on that, but there are other syntax requirements such as using this as a new line operator. Anywho's, so that's going to set our counts there. We're going to do that. It's still the same. And then we're going to go and read our vertex data. So we're going to set this up here. Let's copy this. And we'll paste that into here. So I'll just tab that back. Okay, so we're gonna use this format again. Put that in there. This is a comment. Place that with two dashes. Sorry. This stuff we don't need to do. 3ds Max already has a working 3D environment inside of it, so we're just going to import it directly into the environment. So we don't need to write it this way. So we need to get rid of all this stuff, and this needs to change entirely. So what we're going to do is, instead of writing to an object file, we're going to import to the scene. Okay. To do the scene import, you need to create a special object called a mesh, and then you feed in vertices and you feed in faces. So you have to feed in those two things, and they have to be an array. So we have to first read the buffer. So we need to read the buffers. So in this case, we will be using arrays. So we're going to create a vert array, and we're going to give it a suggested type so that it knows that it's an array type. And we're going to do this again as well for the faces. And then we're going to do basically the same thing that we have here. So we're going to do a loop. So for I equals 1, 2, and then we have our vertex count. Do so this is a little bit different in Max, so we have a little bit different syntax. So here we don't have to use the word do, right? Whatever the third bracket is, it just knows that that's a do. But here you're using keywords, which are shown in blue, to indicate what information you need to input to it. So we need to input a range, and here from for, so we're starting a for loop, and then from here to here, that's our range. And then we do an operation, and we'll repeat for that range or for that amount, basically. So we can copy this, do this twice, because we have to do also the index count as well. And in here we can assign this a few ways. We can assign it directly like this. or we can use a special operator called append. I'll just use append because that's how they do it with Python, I think. So just keep with that. Okay, and I'm just going to use an encapsulation, so these little brackets here, because I have to input some other stuff in here. So we're going to be reading 3 values, right? So read float f, and we have to do that 3 times. Actually, I used the wrong brackets. Actually, I used to use these brackets. Talk about that in a second. All right, so in 3ds Max and in Blender, they have these different types, and I don't know enough to properly explain it. But in 3ds Max, we have this type, which is an array, which means you can put anything in it. And then you have this like more structured array, which looks like this, which means you can only store excuse me, you can only store 3 values in it. In Python, they call this a tuple, and a tuple looks like this, and an array looks like this. Oops, sorry, like that in Python. Just a second, I gotta get a drink here. Excuse me. So these different types of array styles, I don't know. They're confusing. But depending on what you're using, like your API or whatever, it's going to have requirements on what you have to supply to it. So for example, this is our API function, which will interface a model and import it directly into 3ds Max. So it requires a special type of a data structure to it. Okay. So yeah, so we have our thing in here, which we can, I guess, make look more cleaner, I guess. This or something. I don't know. Okay. And then we have, of course, the faces, which basically I think I can just copy this. Yes. And just replace that with that. And this is going to be read short. Short is for the 16-bit integer. Okay, and we'll just copy that down. And then we just pipe it in here. So now we take the arrays, we stick it in here. And this was just for me to reference back, and we can kind of clean this up a little bit. And so there's our code. Okay, so it's basically the same thing. So we have a combination of things that we're doing. We're opening the file, we're setting some global variables that we're using as enumerators, and then we don't have to use these enumerators, by the way, but I instilled them because when I show you stuff for Gnosis or for Blender, these will be used more. So even though it doesn't seem necessary, eventually it's going to become more obvious later. But anyway, so then we seek that position, we then read the information. I don't know where my comment went, but we're reading the buffer info, and I keep using the wrong characters for this. Read the buffer information, then we calculate the counts from the buffer, and then we then read the buffer. So I guess this would all be the same general area stuff that we're doing. So I'll go like this, I think makes more sense. Read the buffer, and then we input the data into the array for both the vertices and the faces, and then we import that to the scene. Okay, so that all about done in about 41 lines, where this took about just close to 90. If I cleaned it up a little bit now, it'd still be around 90. So it's is that half? Is that almost quarter? It's a great deal less than if you were doing it in C++ for making a model importer. So something with built-in functions, like being able to read things, makes it a great deal quicker and easier to deal with. So later on I'm going to be showing you guys with Blender and Gnosis. Gnosis provides you, the author Rich provides you with his own helper class to save you the hassle of having to write your own every time. But unfortunately, Blender doesn't. Blender does not have that luxury. So everybody has to write their own byte handler class. So that's why I instilled that in the beginning in C++, because that's you're going to encounter that problem. Okay, one last thing. 3ds Max does require a value of 1 to be added there as well. That's confusing because you're going to notice in Gnosis and also in Blender they do not. I actually didn't even think that the object file required it. I thought it was just a 3ds Max thing. But yeah, 3ds Max requires your numbers to be positive, meaning that 0 is invalid. And that's why we kept getting that error in the last video, and I was so confused. I had to add a 1 to the face indices, which was throwing me off. But yeah, we also have to do that in here. That's just a little thing with Max. Now we should be able to run this. Now when we have an error, it's going to show up in the scripting listener, so you have to also enable this, and it's going to show in red if there's anything wrong. So we're going to go up here to evaluate, and it's going to run. So now we have, of course, we have something wrong because I'm tired. I probably screwed something up. So we're going to read through here, and it says 34 come up with an error. So probably this convention that I'm using here doesn't make sense. So I might just shorten this up here like this. I might have to use another bracket around here to encapsulate it, so I'm just not going to bother with it right now. So I'll just do this for now. But yeah, we can run this now and see if that got around it. So now we're getting 28. So wait a minute. What did I screw up here? So, okay, this is what I did wrong. That's got to be bracketed. Now it should work. Nope. Okay, so now we're getting something else wrong. So I forgot to do this again. I have to skip down past this area. So I have to take the stride subtracted by 12. So we do the same thing. So seek f, just put some brackets here, minus 12, and we're going to use rel. Okay, and we're on that, and it worked this time. So now there should be a model somewhere in here. This is also inverted. You can see it's all black, so I'm going to undo this, and just to quickly fix this, we just put a negative in front here, and that would flip the vertices, and now your object is correctly in there. Okay, so that's Maxscript. I thought I would just show it. Probably you won't interact with Maxscript, but I thought it would be important to show how much easier it is when you already have an established library for dealing with reading bytes and stuff like that. It's a little bit quicker on writing things, and I don't know, it makes it more cleaner as well, I think. Yeah, so anyway. Alright, so the next one we'll move on to some other APIs. Thanks for watching, see you in the next one.